A very good afternoon. On to your markets news now. Asian markets generally traded higher in today's session, taking their cue from U.S. markets from the previous day. There's said to be some optimism around initial trade talks set to take place between the U.S. and Chinese officials in Switzerland over the coming weekend. The Nikkei share average rose by 0.41%. The Hang Seng Index ended the session 0.4% in the black, while the Shanghai Composite Index rose by 0.3% at the close. U.S. stock markets ended yesterday's session higher, this as the U.S. Fed kept interest rates unchanged. Fed Chair Jerome Powell signaled a cautious approach to monetary policy, highlighting growing risks to the inflation outlook as well as employment, stressing the need for more data before considering rate cuts. Meanwhile, investors continue to keep a close eye on developments in terms of U.S.-China trade talks. The Dow Jones Industrial Average rose by 0.7%. The S&P 500 closed up 0.43%, while the Nasdaq Composite Index gained 0.3%. All right, looking at local indicators, we see that the All-Share Index is currently trading down 0.2% at 91,394 index points. On the currency front, the rand is trading at 18.23 against the US dollar, 20.55 vis-a-vis the euro, and 24.19 against the British pound. In terms of commodities, we see that gold is trading at $3,345 an ounce, platinum at $977 an ounce, while Brent crude oil is trading at $61.84 a barrel. All right, let's get into conversation with Lindile Malgas. He's an investment strategist at Absa Investments. Thanks very much for joining us, Lindile. So market players expected the Fed to keep rates unchanged, but what did you get from Jerome Powell, that is the Fed chair, in terms of the tone of his speech and the prospect of further rates down the line?
So from last night's meeting with the US Fed, I think the tone was that the US Fed is definitely not in a hurry to cut interest rates. And the tone that we are getting from that, they are in a more wait-and-see mode where they will be assessing some of the underlying data. But what they also did mention is the tariffs and the threat to the inflation outlook. And also we are seeing, when you're looking at some of the data, that the inflation does remain relatively contained. But if you're looking at employment levels, unemployment also remaining relatively stable. So markets have tapered the expectations for a rate cut in June and increased the expectations for a rate cut within July. So markets also are filtering in those expectations and some of the comments that we are seeing from the US Fed last night.
So what are your optimism levels when it comes to the pending US-China trade talks over the weekend?
Yes, so we did see that being announced last week. Markets have already priced that into the market performance that we have seen, and markets just remaining a bit cautious. What I think will be key and coming out of those talks is whether or not we can see a de-escalation within tariffs, and then ultimately some of the key things that will matter to markets from those discussions is whether or not we can see a removal on tariffs from products that will be harder to substitute, but we do not expect an entire removal of the tariffs that have been placed on the US-China trade tensions. And also, lastly, we do still think that the US will go ahead with their plans to industrialize, so not expecting a change on that regard.
Yeah, speaking of industrializing, I see that the manufacturing number just came out. That is the manufacturing production number. It's always 2 months back. That's for the month of March. Production in terms of manufacturing contracted by 0.8%. It's, I think it's about the fifth or the fourth consecutive contraction, but it's not as bad as the previous contraction, which was about 3-point-something%. It's coming down, but just give us your reflections on how the manufacturing sector is doing in South Africa.
Yes, definitely it did disappoint markets. Even if you look at the month-on-month number, market participants had expected on a month-on-month basis for manufacturing production to actually expand. However, it did decline, so that being a huge disappointment to markets. But if you're looking at some of the data that has been coming out from a manufacturing point of view, looking at the Absa manufacturing PMI, that also remaining in contractionary territory, and also looking at some of the comments from the participants from an economic outlook point of view, you are seeing that the manufacturing industry locally and globally is in a tough space currently, and that is on the back of weaker demand and weaker new orders as well, and also seeing a rise within input costs as well. So those are some of the factors that we are seeing proving to be challenging for the manufacturing sector so far.
Yeah. So Lindile, President Ramaphosa launched the second phase of the Operation Lindile initiative yesterday, seeking to improve local government service delivery, digital connectivity, as well as ensuring that centres of work and where people are actually living come closer together, and a continuation, of course, in the area of energy and logistics markets in the long run. If well executed, do you think that these will translate into positive things for the markets? Because obviously a market thrives on an economy that's doing well.
Yes, 100%. These initiatives are aimed at addressing critical areas within the economy, and this will allow the economy to function a bit more better. So that does read positively both for consumers and businesses alike, and that ultimately will impact markets and businesses' performance. We have seen some of the negative impacts that the logistics and energy crisis have had on the economy, and we do see that from a service delivery point of view, that has become a priority, but we do see that as being one of the most complex ones to achieve, particularly given the issues that we are seeing at a lot of the South African municipalities as well. And we're still waiting for further detail in terms of timelines and some of the steps that they are looking to take. And also what will be key is looking at the budget, the upcoming budget, and whether or not we will see spending being directed to some of these initiatives.
Yeah, Lindile, more to us, but not enough time. We're going to leave it there. That was Lindile Malgas. He's an investment strategist at Absa Investments. After a short break, Juliet will have more news for you.